Alright guys, how you been? Been a while, huh? Welcome back. Got some preliminary stuff to talk about, and par usual, if this doesn't interest you or you find yourself bored to death, obviously fast forward to the meat, which is what I've been calling chaos reigns. I talked a little bit about this earlier. So that's what the meat will consist of. Let me turn this down again. Still a little too loud. Alright. So what's been going on? It's like I said, it's been a while, right? Been a little bit of drama. I'm not going to go into it. Thought about this for a while now. Should I make a bigger deal about a big deal? I decided no. For those of you that know what I'm talking about, that's fine. For those that don't, you're not really missing anything. Suffice to say, the HNS Games site and the magazine, that's all been indefinitely put on hold, discontinued. Let's just leave it at that. But moving forward, still going to be pumping out games, still going to be creative, still going to be doing stuff. And so yeah, just keep moving forward, right? We learn from our mistakes, etc. So a little bit of drama there, somewhat stressful, but you know, at the end of the day, it is what it is. And I'm not any worse for the wear. So the other major thing is, oh my God, you know, I went to the dentist about a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, to get a filling. Simple process, right? A filling. It should be easy thing to do. Apparently not for this dentist. They didn't do the bite right, so after they did it, my bite was off. I have a high tolerance for a lot of things, so I just ignored it. Went about my business for probably a month and a half, 2 months. But over that period of time, I think since that bite wasn't right, it stressed the tooth that they had worked on, or something happened, and the nerves died, and you know what that means. Root canal. So I went back about a week ago to the same place that did the filling. So the bite's off. I'm starting to get a little irritation. Got to fix the bite a little better. They worked on it. Went downhill from there. Thursday night, let's see, it was the last normal meal I was able to eat. Early Friday afternoon. From then on out, sheer pain, man. Just, you don't know pain until you have a serious tooth pain. And I've dealt with this before, but maybe if it's been a while, you forget how bad it is. You know, when it's 3 in the morning on a Friday and you're watching YouTube videos on how to pull your own tooth, you know it's bad. I came to my senses and I realized the potential error of my ways. You don't need to pull your own tooth, but it suffice to say it was miserable. Luckily, I was able to get in to see a dentist Saturday morning, not the one that I've been going to, because they don't have emergency hours or after hours or weekend hours or anything. So I was able to get some painkillers and some antibiotic, and just yesterday I was finally able to get that root canal that unfortunately I needed. But they were fantastic. I didn't feel a thing. I've had root canals before. You know, they get a bad rep, and no, they're not fun. It's stressful. It takes a while, but man, they did great. So, today was the first day since, like I said, Thursday night, I was able to eat a normal person meal, and that was very nice. Still a little bit of soreness from the procedure, but my God, the pain. I was trying everything. I think Friday and Saturday night, I couldn't even sleep. I was just pacing back and forth. Completely miserable. So, you know, it puts things in perspective in your life when you deal with that intensity of pain. Nothing else matters. It really doesn't. But made it through that. The other thing is St. Louis Blues update report. We've got second round that we made it to, playing the Dallas Stars. And I saw that John Krantz had posted that he was at one of the games. I think the first home game, or maybe from the last round. Perhaps that is what he was talking about. There might be a few others of you out there in old Tejas that are following the Dallas Stars, and you know, hats off to your team. You got a good one. But I don't know. We'll see. It's a close series. The Blues are up 2-1 in that series now. I expect the series to be tied up, and it'll probably come down to a best-of-3 series. So, but if we can make it to the third round, that's fantastic. Dallas has been phenomenal on their penalty kill, only allowing, I think, 1 goal so far the whole postseason, and that was from us. Blues are undefeated on the road postseason, so some interesting stats there. What else? I think that brings us to this stuff. Now, as I said, I've been calling this Chaos Reigns, and if I can pull up some rules here. There we go. If you guys don't know this or have this, get yourself a wireless keyboard and mouse. It's just pays off in dividends, let me tell you. So this is, I stuck with the same theme for the cover. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this very good. It's printed off a little darker than I wanted it to be. But I changed it up, and I went back to the initial title that I was using because it fits the style of the game more. I had gone on record as saying it seems kind of generic, but I have to say the content, the historicity of the game is not necessarily historically specific, although I use specific historical British 6th Airborne Unit. You know, it's got kind of a Rifles in the Ardennes thing. Yeah, you can call it that, but the Rifles in the Ardennes game could be Rifles anywhere, right? So there's that. I went back to Dice Leader. It's just, you know, it's a little more, I think, enticing. I got the dice popping out there because it's dice drafting, dice driven, dice rolling game. It's dice, dice, dice. So that's probably what I'm going to go with on that. I've got some outlines for scenarios. This is what I've come up with so far. Still says Chaos Reigns. I've changed that online here. But this is what I'm going for. And I'm trying to remind myself with pretty much everything I'm doing to keep things simple, succinct, compact. That's the mantra of this thing. And so yeah, let me bring it down here to my level so you can see hopefully what's going on here. Let's pull over here. What we really need to see is this right there. Try and get this as good as I can for you. There we go. This isn't going to be the best, but it'll have to suffice. What do you think of that? Yay, nay? Let's go with that right there. So similar to what I showed you when I last talked to you. Let's see there. Alright, there we go. So what we got going on here? We've got, again, well, first off the bat, and I should add that the front door is open here and the back door so I can get a breeze. So you may hear live sounds of the Deep South here, downtown New Orleans, people passing by. It's Jazz Fest here. So enjoy the background sounds you may hear as we proceed. Back to this. You may notice that it is now less Candy Crush looking and more Crush. So less candy, more Crush. The dice that I have here, finally broke down and got some 6th Airborne dice. You can get these from, what is this, Bolt Action, Warlord Games. I know you used to be able to get them through Flames of War had dice like this, but you had to buy them in tins, and they came with all kinds of information markers that you don't necessarily need if you just want the dice, and paying a little more than you probably should for what you're getting. But this is just the dice, and I think I got these at Miniature Market. So, yeah. Gives a little more thematic feel, and like I said, it does Candy Crush dice. Were functional, but it just wasn't given the right feel. So, what I've done here is already set up some stuff. You ain't missing too much thus far. What I've got is 3 platoons, 3 squads each platoon. That's fairly standard and conventional, at least with the things that I tend to do. And initially I had dealt with, so over here, right, this is the turn track, but it also serves a lot of other simultaneous functions, which we will get into. But what I had going on is each platoon represented on the turn track here. Why? Because the turn track also serves as a kind of map, if you will. Map, quote unquote. You're going to begin here, make your way across the map, or as I've been calling it, the turn track spaces. So it was working okay, but it was hard to allow for individual actions of the squads within each platoon. So if one squad moved and the other 2 didn't, how do you represent that with a single platoon counter? You know, you can't move that platoon counter if just one of the squads moves. So that was kind of overly complicated and fiddly. So I chucked it, and I finally, you know, which I was reluctant to do because, again, I want to keep this minimal, simplistic. So I finally went ahead with chits to represent each squad, and it's not so bad after all, and it works better. It's simpler, easier to deal with. Just to refresh, we've got the morale, or I guess you could call it leadership, of each platoon represented here with these dice on the upper portion of each platoon. And then with each squad you have their strength, which represents their fire power, and manpower, I guess. So only about 5 pages of rules thus far, which I'm very happy with. Again, keeping with that simplistic endeavor. Starts out with a brief introduction, and I'm just reading from the rules here real quickly. Components, breaks all that down. General setup, which for the most part is where we are at. However, we do need to seed this turn track. Now again, the way I had it was probably not even to say that it wasn't complete, but again, it was fiddly and getting complicated how I was trying to represent line of sight and cover / terrain on this turn track. So what I've done is boiled it down. A lot of this is going to be abstracted, so boiled it down into these chits, 0, 1, 2, and 3. So there would be 3 zeros, 3 1s, 3 2s, and 3 3s for a total of 12 chits. If I did my math correctly, you can check me on that. You're going to seed before you begin. You're going to seed the turn track. So let's go ahead and seed it. You're going to do it randomly. So that is 0, and you may guess what this represents, or you may not. 0, interesting, and a 2. This may seem time consuming, but it's really not. And I've stated already that this setting up preliminary stuff is half the fun for me when it comes to games. There's a game called Role Player. I don't own it, but I've watched the rules for it just because I love game mechanics, which we all are fully aware of. Need to shut up about it. But this Role Player game is cool because it ever or never played Dungeons and Dragons, it deals with building your characters, but they've made a game out of building your characters, and I really like that idea. I wish somebody would do that for a war game. Not necessarily building characters as such, but outfitting your units. Just make a game out of that in and of itself. That would be interesting, at least to me. Speaking of interesting games, I think it would be cool to have a game where you're just a medic. I think me and Dan Pancaldi were talking about this, and he says, "Hey, Lock and Load already has this. They got a medic in there." No, not a medic that is added as a supplemental secondary afterthought thing, a game that revolves around you as a medic. That would be cool as well. So now our turn track is seated, and you're going to say, hey, that's great, but isn't that going to get crowded? All this stuff you're going to put on there? Well, you can put stuff off to the side, right? The amount of turns is going to be specified in the scenario rules. And then, let's see, where else? You're going to start moving up the track. Now, I haven't decided if you will be required to spend action points to move if there are no activated Germans yet, or if you can just move. I haven't decided that yet. Why would that be important? Because seemingly wouldn't matter if you just keep moving and never activate anything, but at some point you will, and it makes for a more nail-biting, interesting turn if some of your troops have already expended a number of action points at the time of enemy activation. So I haven't decided that yet, but suffice to say, I'm going to move a squad. How do you do that? Well, let's start moving. Let's bring first squad from first platoon up onto there. Now what do you do next? You, based on the scenario, will put chits, your non-activation and activation chits, in a cup. And this has a very, those of you that are familiar with it, kind of platoon leader vibe going at the moment. And since I moved on there, I'll need to draw a chit. And I drew a gray, which means nothing happens. Nobody has been activated having moved to there, at which point I could move further with that squad and or bring other squads up. Let's move him up again. Draw another chit. Let's say we do draw a red one just for time's sake. And the number of chits you place in here again are going to vary according to a scenario. Drew a red chit. That means Germans have been activated. Where are they? You're going to roll to determine that. And the way I have it so far is you're going to roll two. I don't know why I have 2 dice 6. Might have to change that. It seems an awful lot. If you roll 2 dice 6 to determine where the Germans activate, that means they could conceivably activate behind you, and I don't know how I feel about that. I guess I don't feel good about it. I've always liked to feel like if you've made it thus far, then this is area behind you that has been cleared. I don't know if I've said this already. So maybe it should be like a 1 dice 6 plus something. Let's just go with the 1 dice 6 and see what that gets us. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that means German 1st Platoon is activated here, represented as such. I'm gonna, like I said, if we haven't already established the number of action points available, we would do so at this point. That is still up in the air, which I will decide on. And the action points, I don't know if I've already said this, but it is what I've always wanted to do. It is a shared action point pool, which I refer to as SAP. And what that means is, based on the number of activated squads, that will determine how many dice you roll for the shared available action points. But before we do that, we need to roll for our German 1st Platoon. And we do this randomly. We get a 3 for their leadership / morale. And we get 2 4s and a 2 for the 3 squads. Now, based on that would be what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 squads, all told, enemy and British. That means we roll 2 dice 6 for our shared action point pool. That gets us 7. We place the 7 thusly, and that is the action points we will, action point pool from which actions are drawn. Now we determine initiative. Simply do this by rolling. Highest roll wins, and we roll ties. So the Germans get the initiative. And the way I have it, again, subject to change, In order to perform an action, you have to roll less than your leadership. So they would need a 1 or 2 to perform actions, and they got it. So let's go ahead and deduct an action from the sap. Make that 3 a 2. Now there are 6, right? So what do the Germans want to do? Well, that depends. It depends on the range. The maximum allowable range in this thing is 6. Everybody has the same potential when it comes to range. I didn't divvy it up where this squad can only fire at a distance of 2, and this squad can only fire at a distance of 4. Although that works and is used heavily, it seems a little restrictive to say that, you know, this squad couldn't fire. I picture like a guy standing just outside of the range of somebody, kind of like waving his fist and laughing because you can't reach me, I'm out of range. Well, yeah, maybe, but it's balanced in that respect, and that everybody has the same range potential. Now, when it comes to support weapons, I have differentiated range allotment based on mortars and machine guns. I won't get into that here because a lot of that is still remains to be seen as far as sussing the rules out on that. But so what do they want to do? Fire and move. Again, it depends on the range. So they're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Are within range, that's fine. But then there's something else you need to take into account, and this is something that I just recently ironed out. May change as well. But line of sight, yes, there's line of sight in here. Again, let me go back to these green numbers. What are these? This represents numerical factors that will affect movement, they will affect cover, and they will affect line of sight. They serve a threefold purpose. How about that, huh? So obviously, the higher the number, the better the cover. Also, the higher the number, the more actions it takes to move. So it would cost 1 action to move 1 turn space into 0s or 1s, and it costs 2 actions to move into a turn space consisting of a level of 2 or 3 cover. So when it comes to line of sight, you're gonna, let's see how I have this. I just banged this out. Let's see, roll 2 dice 6. If the roll is greater than the sum of the intervening cover levels, a clear line of sight exists. So if I hadn't mentioned this already, yes, there's some dice rolling, but this really has been boiled down just about to as simple as I can get it. But it does require some legwork rolling the dice. So what is that? That is 2 dice 6, and you need to roll. Yeah, you need to roll greater than. So he's got what, 3? You don't count the level of cover that the firing unit is on. You don't count the level of cover that the defending unit is on. You do count the intervening cover. So that's 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we need to roll greater than 10 to beat that line of sight. He rolled a 7, so he does not have a line of sight. That means he cannot shoot. Not all is lost, because just because that squad can't fire, another squad may have line of sight, and this represents an abstracted lateral positioning of squads, such that, you know, that although they are in the same, relatively the same distance from the enemy units, the British units, they're not necessarily, although they look like it, they're not necessarily quote-unquote stacked in the same area. So let's check and see if another squad has line of sight. But before we do so, we need to roll to see if, and here's where more rolling comes in, right? We need to roll to see if they get another action. So again, needing, is it less than or equal to or less than? You would need actions. Let's roll. So the way I have it now is less than. I wonder if I might change that to equal to or less than. But then that would mean a 6. Leadership morale of 6 is always going to work. So they got a 3 based on the way I have it right now. they were not able to get another action. Had they done so, rolled a 1 or 2 again, they could have done another action. And they could continue to perform actions, siphoning off what is potentially the British actions without me being able to do anything. But because they failed their action roll, initiative now switches to me. Looking at, and I moved this guy about halfway up here to represent being spent. Once you're up here, you're spent, but he isn't quite spent. That may be changing as well, make it a little more easier to represent, but that guy's half spent. So we got a 5 here. Obviously, we're going to go with him because he's going to be easy to get an action from. So he needs to roll less than a 5. He gets a 4. Let's see. Let's go with this guy. He's going to attempt to fire. Actually, let's try and move this time. But if he had attempted to fire, again, he would need to roll greater than, is that what it is, the intervening cover levels. If that was successful, he could then fire. Let's try and move though. So if you'll notice, this is a 2. It takes 2 actions to move there. So he's already got 1 action, so that's half a move. Now let's see if he can get another action. I don't know if I took that away. There's now 5 sap points remaining. He gets a 1, so that is successful. He does move. He's able to go here, and that is now 4 shared action points left. Haven't fully decided on reaction fire. I think the way the initiative switching back and forth at any moment possibly negates the need for immediate reaction fire, but I may wedge that in here somehow. So he is spent. Let's see, what else we got? We got 4 action points left. So we have 2 squads left that can do something. So they roll 4, which is also less than. That brings that to a 3. And as you can see, the better your leadership is, the more your actions you'll be able to take. Wow, he got another one too. So he is also moved. That is, let's assume he was here. Let's put him here, 2nd squad. In which case, he wouldn't have need to move twice. Just to do that, I was under the impression that he was stacked with the 1/1, so that's my bad. We just keep going. 1-3, he's halfway there, and then that becomes a 1, and to complete his move action, he gets it, and he is moved as well. So where does that bring us? That brings us to the fact that, again, I think I just over moved without needing to, but I should add that if you're unable to complete a double move action to move into a 2 or a 3 cover level in the same turn, I don't know if I have it where it carries over to the next turn or if you have to start over. I guess I should have it where it carries over, or you're never going to move anywhere. So as you can see, there's a lot of work to be done here, but a lot of the basics are coming together. Double move action to cover, carries over. So how does fire work? Fire, I did have it, although in a way that I like to refer to as clever, unnecessarily complex, so I chucked that as well. The way I did have it was these were going to be, instead of 0, 1, 2, or 3, it was going to be, I think, 1 through 6. In order to fire, you would need to, I think cover was also represented by a 1 through a 6. It was cover, line of sight, and something else. But anyway, you would add the line of sight, which again was anywhere from 1 to 6. Cover, which is anywhere from 1 to 6. Something else, I forget now. And then roll 2 dice, add your firepower, and compare the result. If higher, then I had a combat results table of sorts. Depending on how much higher, it would determine how many hits you got. It worked for the most part, but again, it seemed like a little more work than it needed to be for what it was. So I went with an already time-tested and true method, which is this: what's your strength on a squad? So let's say, for instance, 1-1 has a clear line of sight. They're going to fire. 1-1 being first squad, first platoon. They have a 2 strength. We'll assume he's not spent. He fires, right? He would roll 2 dice since he has a 2 strength, looking for, depending on his range, if he was at this, and you can stack in the same turn space as an enemy unit. If he was in the same space or only 1 space away, he would need to roll only a 4, 5, or 6 for a hit. If he is 2, 3, 4, or 5 spaces away, he would need a 5 or 6, and if he was 6 spaces away, he would need to roll a 6. So let's assume 1, 2, 3. He's only 4 spaces away, so he needs to roll a 5 or 6 on 2d6, and he gets no hits. Assuming he did get, let's say both of these were hits, or even one. Let's assume one of these were a hit, right? You have to determine which squad you were firing at, which I failed to do. Once that is determined, then you can apply the results. So let's say he was firing at first platoon's second squad, which would be this guy, and he got a hit. You would change that to a 1, but additionally you would place a new die with a 1 below, representing its current level of suppression, which, since that is equal to his strength, he is actually broken. Move that down there, and needs to rally. Additionally, you have to take into account the cover level that that unit is on, that squad, which is a 1, and the cover level and the turn space directly behind. If that cover level was better, he would be required to route 1 space behind at no cost of an action. So that's how firepower works. And then you expend an action. You would expend an action to rally, needing to get less in his morale / leadership. A lot of basic stuff in here, but it's kind of put together in a collage that I think represents an original, for the most part, original concept that I'm fairly fond of. Obviously, I got a lot of stuff to work out. This might be available 2 to 3 months out. Once I decide on a few decisions that are left, then I can just lock it down and fine tune it. So that's pretty much where we're at. A couple other things to throw in that I've got. A couple other actions you can perform is removing suppression. If it's getting pretty high and you're afraid you might break, you can attempt to remove suppression. Support weapons, let's see. Victory points, how do you win this thing? Depends on the scenario, specific rule. You've got objectives, which are represented by these 6 airborne shits. And I don't know if I want to decide ahead of time via scenario rule where they are placed, which is probably what I'll go with on the turn track, or add them to the activation shit, and once you draw one, that's where the objective goes. I think I like the former idea better. Also, I've got a variable point level for the objectives that could be, and there's 3 of them, right? So when you do achieve and or hold an objective, you would draw one of these randomly to determine how many points that objective is worth. And then we have, you can gain points by eliminating squads. You can gain points by exiting off or making it to a certain distance, exiting off of the turn track or making it up to a certain distance. Any number of those. And I also have, tentatively it's going to be 4 scenarios. I've really only got 2 half written and unplay tested, so a lot of work to be done there. And then events. So should have another cup here. That's this one here, and it's got 12 shits in it. Now each time a new space is moved to, And this is optional, you don't have to use this, but it adds flavor and a kind of narrative. Each time a British airborne unit squad moves to a new space for the first time, you would draw a chit, 1 through 12, right? Say draw a 12, and then you go and look and see what 12 represents via event. And it could be anything from a sniper, out of command, etc. These are things that are standard throughout a tactical engagement, but they will really only directly affect the mechanics of the game. So I guess what I'm trying to say is a lot of that stuff will be abstracted. So say for instance a sniper event might be represented by conducting a morale test to see if a squad is pinned or not, or the levels of action points that are available could be adjusted as a result, etc. So things that will really only directly affect the mechanics of the game as such. And I think that about covers it. Within the rules I have an example of an ops sheet, which I've been calling this the operations sheet or ops sheet, set up with everything decked out so you can look and see how things are represented and what they mean. And that's pretty much it. There are some, as you can see here, some chits that will need to be cut out. Originally I wanted to stick with just dice, but then I found myself using dice for ridiculous reasons just to adhere to that rule. So I went ahead and threw some chits in here, maybe about half to a third of a page of chits. You've got your event chits, your covered chits, turn chit, your squad chits for Germans and British, victory point chits, very, very few support weapon chits, and a turn chit. So that's pretty much it there. So that's Dice Leader in a nutshell. Don't think I've left anything out. No, that's pretty much it. So you guys let me know what you think. If there's something that you have a question about, if there's a suggestion you have, changes, additions, subtractions, something that caught your eye or ear, let me know. Post it below this video and we'll interact and talk about it. I appreciate feedback. But that's the game. Dice Leader, I'm fairly happy with it so far. Still got a lot of work to do with it. But should prove to be a pretty interesting, pretty fun game. Alright, I'll talk to you guys next time I talk to you guys. Bye.